The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, along with former Oshkosh Mayor and City Councilwoman Melanie Bloechl. This November there will be a race for state assembly seats across the state of Wisconsin. We are joined on this particular edition of Eye on Oshkosh by one of the contenders for the 54th Assembly District. He is the Democratic candidate. His name is Gordon Hintz, and he is trying to unseat the incumbent who has served in that seat since 1987, Gregg Underheim. Gordon, welcome. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me here, Cheryl.
Why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself, first of all?
Sure. Well, I am born and raised in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Actually went to Longfellow Elementary before they tore it down, Washington, Webster Stanley, and then Oshkosh North High School, where I graduated in 1992. Went up to college at Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota. After graduating with a degree in political science, I went and interned for U.S. Senator Herb Kohl in Washington, D.C. That gave me my first real introduction to legislative politics. I campaigned that year for U.S. Senator Paul Wellstone before returning back to Washington, D.C., where I did some time with Representative Jay Johnson, and then back to Senator Kohl's office for about 2 years. In 1999, I returned to Wisconsin to attend graduate school at UW-Madison, where I got a master's in public affairs. After earning my master's, I pursued a career in local government for a while, and I got a job with the city of Long Beach, California, where I worked for about 3 years, including 2 years in the budget office.
That had to be interesting out there.
Exactly. It was a good experience. I called them my spinach years. It's sort of like not something I necessarily enjoyed, but I knew it would be good for me, and I really got a lot of experience out of it.
And then you've been back here how long?
About 2 months.
Okay.
I'd sort of been looking for ways to come back and different opportunities. Originally, when I took the job in California, it's when the state hiring freeze had already occurred here. And a lot of governments weren't hiring, and I really was about getting as much experience as I could get, and the program out there offered me that, and then sort of for the second 2 years I was there, I was kind of looking for the right opportunity, and I moved back with the intention of running, and I was able to do some consulting for my dad since we're both in the same business. A lot of my local government experience is sort of what he does, doing executive hiring for municipalities throughout the state, and doing some fee studies as well. So I'm happy to be back, and it feels great. There's a lot of good things going on, and I think my candidacy can be one of them.
Well, why are you running? I guess why don't we go there next?
In a nutshell, because I know that I can do a better job of representing the taxpayers in Oshkosh and Wisconsin than Representative Underheim. I feel that we need someone down in the legislature that can get the legislature focused on the issues that matter, on jobs, health care, economic development, addressing the growing senior population. And I feel that I have the experience that counts. Like I mentioned, I've worked in federal, state, and local government, and that's being involved in legislative politics and understanding what works and what doesn't. When I was in Madison, I worked on the Kettle Commission as a research assistant, which, as those of you that know, tried to address the state and local issue that plagues us today. And my budget experience, which included, balancing a $1.6 billion budget for the fifth largest city in California. I feel that I bring fresh ideas and energy to an office that really needs a break from the past. And quite frankly, I think Representative Underheim is in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, I agree with you. I just kind of want to follow up on that for a moment, if I could, because you said you think that you can get them more focused. How do you propose doing that? I mean, this is a man who, as I said in the opening, has been there since 1987. That's a long time, not for a career politician, I guess, but it's a long time for us.
We feel every ounce of it.
Yes, every penny of it. And, you know, he doesn't seem to be able to get them focused. What will Gordon Hintz do?
Well, you know, I think we have to highlight the fact that the issues that are coming, that are, you know, the leadership of the Assembly is taking us into, aren't addressing the fundamental issues of health care, of jobs, of economic development, of seniors. You know, instead we've got gay marriage, we've got conceal and carry gun laws, we've got amending the Constitution for taxes and things like that. And you know, I see Representative Underheim kind of riding the fence occasionally saying, well, I don't know if I'm going to do this, but then ultimately he ends up supporting Representative John Gard 98% of the time. Listen, I mean, I'm a kind of guy that likes to work with people, and I realize that it takes 50 votes to accomplish something. So I think the first thing you have to do is, you know, get down there and realize that my job here is to work with people that share the same interests that I do, that believe this is what we need to do for our state and for our communities, and you know, just really try to get away from the symbolic and the divisive issues that, I mean, you know, Madison sort of turned into a mini Washington, and that's really disappointing. There was a tradition in this state where you could disagree, but Republicans had progressive solutions and Democrats had progressive solutions, and that's just not the atmosphere that's down there today. So I think a fresh change would definitely benefit that.
I agree. You spoke about the growing senior population, and with that, in the state of Wisconsin, our healthcare system is burgeoning with cost. There have been no solutions on how to control costs for either the employer, the employee. Prescription costs, we're not doing anything to address that. Mr. Underheim is the chair of the healthcare committee. Are there things, because the boomers are getting older, I mean, we're going to have a huge senior population. We have growing deficits, shared revenue that is depleting faster, you know, and you being on the Kettle Commission, and it's a great opportunity for me, because when I ran against Mr. Underheim, Representative Underheim, I brought the shared revenue issue to the forefront, probably before a lot of people were ready to hear about it. It was maybe just one session too soon. But I knew that this was coming because you could see the trend and what was happening, and right off the Kettle Commission's findings. And going through the Kettle Commission had suggested that shared revenue was someplace that the state could cut to kind of plug their holes. Governor Thompson at that time came out and said, no. Shared revenue is a non-starter, you're a fearmonger, and Don Kettle came out and said it was a non-starter as well. Now, you were on that Kettle Commission. Was it truly a non-starter? And I really want your honest opinion, not because we're sitting across the table and you're on Oshkosh.
Sure.
Was it truly a starter during all of this discussion, or was this something that they thought was going to be able to be pushed far enough back that, you know, we weren't going to hear about it for a while?
Well, in 2000 and 2001, I would say that if you asked the state people, they would have said it was a starter. The problem when you have a dialogue, because the commission included state officials, local officials, county officials, town officials, was you were always going to be walking on someone's toes, and it was about trying to figure out the right level of service. Of course, you know, towns like that they can provide the level of service they choose, and cities like to, you know, no one wants to walk on anybody's home rule. So it may have been on the table for a second, but it quickly was pulled off, and it became, you know, after a certain amount of meetings, we realized that it was probably going to be more to do with recommendations than about actually achieving something as a group. I mean, it didn't have any legislative impact anyway. But I mean, the truth is the shared revenue issue. You've got state officials that don't trust local officials, and you've got local officials that feel that the state officials keep them hamstrung from doing anything. And Representative Underheim, you know, has kept shared revenue flat since '95 and voted to cut it by 10% without any explanation to the city citizens or local officials on how they were supposed to address that gap. So.
And that's another thing. Gregg Underheim miraculously appeared from the wings. He has never appeared in the 11 and a half years that I served on the city council, both as council member and mayor. Gregg Underheim had never appeared in council chambers, not one time, not ever, not to explain upcoming budgetary deficits, not to explain any legislative initiatives that may have a bearing on the city, especially when we were negotiating with firefighters and they gave them the black lung law, which deeply affected, how we go into pay in their pensions and things like that.
Sure.
None of those initiatives were ever explained, expounded upon, discussed in any way, shape, or form. Paul Esslinger, Councilmember Esslinger, went forward and said, I think you should be here. I think you should be talking to us, especially in light of the difficulties that we're going to be facing this last biennium and the upcoming biennium budget. He kind of caught a lot of flack from other council members because they thought that these discussions should be held in a very private way, that we'll try to cajole Mr. Underheim to come in private phone calls and we'll have these discussions in private. What are your feelings about being participatory and communicative with local elected officials, county elected officials? What is your philosophy on that?
I mean, I think, especially with government in general, there's this idea at the state that the state represents one group of citizens and local government represents another group of citizens. Well, to us, in Oshkosh, it's the same people. If you cut spending at one level and raise fees at another level, it's the same people that are ultimately going to be impacted. On my campaign so far, I've been reaching out to groups on both sides that tend to be either more or less sympathetic based on party, but I'm trying to get everybody's input, and I think part of the problem with the leadership we have locally is exactly what you said. I mean, it really does need to be a partnership at the local level, the county level, the regional level. I mean, northeastern Wisconsin is sort of our economic base, and what's good for us is good for sort of the regional population and the employment sector. And it's best just to be straightforward. I mean, I think the two biggest things in government is to know the facts and to tell the truth. And I read those articles when Paul was running this spring, and it's really disappointing. I mean, if you're going to cut shared revenue and just turn your back on the city, I think you should be responsible enough to come to the council and explain why the decision was made and maybe address what future solutions you're going to do to offset that. They were able to cut the shared revenue because cities don't have a big lobbyist down there throwing money at these people. Look, they balanced the budget on cutting aid to cities and cutting funding and raising tuition at the universities. Well, these are two really important entities that represent people that are probably the key to our economic success. And they were the ones who had the least influence down there, and therefore they paid the price. So, I think someone that was really representing Oshkosh would meet with the Jane Van Huy's, would meet with the Mark Harrises and the Paul Esslingers and the rest of the council. I mean, I think the council's done a decent job of looking at where they want to be in 20 years, but they need a partner at the state level. Like, what can we get out of the state level? Can we get some brownfield money? Can we get some money to help develop the river? Can we get some more attention to the downtown so the city's not, using all of their resources? Can we work with the county and, see how we want to, grow collectively as our area increases population? Can we have a county, local, state solution to the increased senior population and probably the nursing homes?
Well, one of the things, it's one thing to, and like I said, I've listened to some of these council members say, well, I have private conversations with my representative. I guess I just don't understand why we feel or certainly why those elected officials feel as though that they have to pussyfoot around with this particular elected official so as not to upset him or make him, quote unquote, look bad or ask the wrong tough question in public. So it's easier to just have these private conversations where maybe they'll get the right answer, but maybe they won't, but it really won't be on the record. It'll just be between the two guys, the conversation. And my concern is now being on the other side of that dais. I've sat on the representative side, now I'm sitting on the taxpayer side, which I was actually both at one time. But my point here is that That's fine if council members or county representatives or whomever want to have a one-on-one discussion. But I think it's also important to have those discussions so that the constituency as in its entirety can hear those discussions so that they can become informed, to get educated about what the issues are that are going to be confronting our city, so that when they're electing local officials and state officials, that they know what they're standing for, where are you going to move, what is your direction, what's your focus, and we're not getting that. You know, we get these wonderful sound bites and these darn little things that come at, you know, election time that have photo ops that are just lovely because they're all working so hard. But we're not hearing what we need to hear. And what I want to know from you, Gordon, is you're elected to the 54th Assembly District. One of the knocks that I took when I ran was that my focus was the city of Oshkosh. I was too focused on the city of Oshkosh. I need to have a bigger view of the entire state. What will your view be? Will it be Oshkosh? Will it be the state? Will you come and talk to the constituency in listening sessions? You know, how are you going to handle this, especially as a freshman representative?
Sure.
There's going to be a huge learning curve, obviously, but you know, how do you envision yourself doing this?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think a large part of what I'm doing in my candidacy now is still in the introductory phase. This is who I am, this is what I'm about, and reaching out to those groups. You know, when elected, it's going to be a lot more of the same things. This is what I've learned in Madison, this is what's going on. I think it's important for all freshman members to continue to get out there. But it's a really, you know, it's about explaining things. If you cut shared revenue by 10%, what was the trade-off? You know, where did we save money, or why did we decide to do that? I mean, I think, I don't know the explanation, but if there was one, I think that should at least be explained. I think the key is just to continue to you know, have a dialogue with the city more as a partnership. I understand why the state feels it's their purse strings, and I understand that politics in the legislative level is a lot more cut and dry, you know, complicated than cut and dry. You know, I wish I could say, you know, I'm going to go down to Madison and get all that shared money, revenue money we've lost since 1995 because I'm pro-city.
Yeah.
Right. But, you know, I think, for instance, I can meet with the other legislators that represent cities our size and say, well, listen, hey, you know, we've all lost out on shared revenue. We're putting pressure on the property tax. We're not able to invest in our city. The streets are beat up. You know, we don't want to cut back on police and fire or library or key services. You know, what can we do at the state level? And I think, you know, I mean, as a candidate running from Oshkosh, yeah, I am pro-Oshkosh, and I am pushing the city, and I'm pushing the university because it's in the district, because I'm here, you know, representing the people, and I think those are the two most important things. I understand at the state level there's other funding concerns, and you have to look out for Wisconsin overall, and I understand that politics at the legislative level is about, you know, working together, sometimes trading votes, sometimes the product is not what you originally went in there seeking, but it's the best you can do. And my goal is to get the best outcome legislation for the taxpayers of the 54th District.
So I kind of want to follow up on a couple things
Sure.
that Mel asked. So as far as creating this partnership between the state representatives and then the city council, the county board, the school board even, can you promise the constituents and the voters in this district that if Gordon Hintz is elected to serve the 54th Assembly District, that you will come to see the city council quarterly?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was surprised to find out that that wasn't happening.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, I got the legislative update with the 8 pictures the other day, and I thought that that's something that may have been better served if you actually showed up to talk about some of the things. I mean, there are important things at the state level, you know, beyond the immediate funding of things like shared revenue that would probably be of interest. You know, this is coming up, or this is the status of this, and you know, I realize some things may not be as easy to explain, and a lot of things go on, and it's impossible to avoid politics. I mean, again, I'm trying to be the straightforward candidate. It'd be too easy to get up there and say, I'm going to go down there and kick down doors. But yeah, you know, I would be willing to. And I mean, my whole thing is I'll speak to people that, whoever invites me to talk. Again, I've talked to people that are probably not going to vote for a Democrat or never have. I'm still willing to talk to them because I think I've got a message that appeals to everybody, whatever party you are. But you know, they're residents too, and if they're key, you know, they're constituents, and I want to hear what their issues are and know kind of what, you know, what all the issues of the community are. So yeah, I think it's got to be a doors open policy, and you may have to come on your end too.
Well, along with that then, as far as listening sessions with the public, would you hold listening sessions? And if so, what would they be like? What kind of format would you take? Because the reason I ask that is I have just recently learned the way Congressman Tom Petri holds listening sessions. And that's, I don't know if you knew this either.
A talking at session, more or less?
No, you're all in this room, but he takes person by person individually off in a private room, and they have about 5 minutes to speak with him on whatever they want to talk to him about. And there's some real dangers in that, because you're not, you know, there's no record of anything you've said. You know, there's no chance for anyone else to follow up on that issue. There's just danger in that. What would a Gordon Hintz listening session be like?
Well, I mean, the first thing you have to do is, a lot of these people have listening sessions, and they, you know, post a note on the bulletin board in one place or something. I mean, you know, I haven't thought about it enough to do it, but I would put it so maybe it's the same time every quarter. Make sure enough people know. But I think, you know, if you answer questions straightforward and tell people where you stand and why you stand, they'll respect you. I mean, no one's going to agree with you 100% on everything. So the idea of talking to people individually, I mean, you may be able to have a more personal conversation about their problem and your response to that. But from an accountability standpoint, I mean, I think, you know, you want to speak to a bigger audience about what's going on, and I think it's not just about, you know, what's going on, but sort of, you know, you can learn, I think the citizenry can learn from the legislature, you know, what's going on, you know, and ultimately what they can do. You know, you can say, listen, I've tried to go down there and, you know, solve this shared revenue mess, or I've come up with a proposal, but I can't get enough support from, you know, so-and-so because they're doing this. You know, if you bring them in, then it comes collectively, like, then it really is, you're representing Oshkosh, they're behind you, they understand. So I guess it would be a listening session where, you know, you're taking questions out loud. I mean, are you probably going to get, you know, burned, or people disagree or mad? Absolutely. But again, I think they'd respect you a lot more than they would if you go one-on-one behind the door.
Well, exactly, and I think too, it's more time efficient. I mean, you may have 10 people who have the same issue in front of them that they want to talk to you about, and you know, you don't want to sound like a broken record and say the same speech over and over and over again. And that was why we felt it was so important that Representative Underheim, Representative Carol Owens, State Senator Carol Ressler come before the City Council, so she and he can talk to the council as well as the constituents all at once. That's important.
They weren't comfortable with that.
Yeah.
They felt as though they were being summoned.
Yeah. We had some viewer questions that had been emailed to us, and we kind of want to get to those so that we make sure we get them in. Now, the first one, I'm just going to read it verbatim because it was a direct question. The others were just sort of blended into some other things I had to say. This gentleman says, Representative Underheim has done a lot to undermine the people of Oshkosh. How do you plan to turn things around? I could cite all the things Underheim has failed us on, but I'm at work and can't spend the next 6 hours writing this email. So we know how that person feels about Gregg Underheim.
Disenchanted voter. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we can get back to the one fundamental issue that impacts the city of Oshkosh and the services that it provides for the citizens, and that's the shared revenue problem. I think what we need to do is come up with a solution that provides a dedicated revenue source, so it's not an issue every budget that the state has to fight with itself to figure out how much money to give the city to reduce the pressure on property taxes. There's been some proposals going on, taking a look at maybe having taking 1% of the sales tax and or 1 cent of the sales tax and using that revenue to offset property taxes. I think, you know, I'd be open to listening to those things, but sort of removing the politics from it. And in a situation like that, if the economy's good, there'd be increased dollars for cities. And if the economy's bad, you know, it'd be time to tighten up like it is, but it wouldn't be a political decision. Again, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with things like the economy, but you can look at facts and trends. We know that the manufacturing sector has lost 80,000 jobs, many of those in Northeast Wisconsin. We know that 98.5% of the jobs that are going to be created in the next 10 years are service sector jobs, many of those in retail. I think we need to look at, well, what the future economy needs, and it's going to be about brain power. So we need to make sure that the university here at Oshkosh is affordable and accessible, and that as many people as possible that need education or retraining, that perhaps have lost their job or they want to send their kids to school, have that chance. So again, this person wrote in and said they didn't feel that Representative Underheim had done enough for them in Oshkosh, and it's true. And quite frankly, he is one of a few, and he may be one of the only Republican representatives representing a city. The majority of the people in the assembly on the Republican side are from rural areas. Their interests at the leadership level are not places like Oshkosh, and so even if he disagrees with them, ultimately he loses out in caucus. So it's essentially saying he's not effective within his party to say, hey, my city needs this, my community needs this.
Would that be any different for anyone, though? Because no matter who's elected, you, Tony Palmieri, Mr. Underheim again, you're still facing the same issue where you're representing a city.
Right. Well, a lot of it comes down to the case that you can make and the leadership that you can make. Again, I'm not going to go and say to you that, I'm going to go down there and shared revenues back, university's funded, everybody's going to school, free health care. It's going to take some work, but again, I think that's where you start with the people, and maybe even, you find Republicans that represent these kind of areas too, and say, hey, here's how we grow the economy, here's how we invest in cities, here's how we use this as the economic and the cultural engines that they should be. This is sort of the direction that's coming. If we keep looking at tax exemptions for businesses like Walmart, which pay low wages and low benefits, I don't know how that's growing the economy. So a lot of it's going to be sort of changing course and saying this isn't working.
Gordon, you just mentioned something about tax breaks for businesses, and that's something that I've seen an awful lot of. We have an awful lot of special interest groups that are really running the legislature. I used to gripe about that here in Oshkosh, that we kind of have, unfortunately, that shadow government, that they're the puppeteers of things that go on behind the scenes, and the elected officials, unfortunately, sometimes fall into line. That is happening at the state legislative level. All you have to do is look at these candidates and these elected officials' campaign finance reports, and you can tell exactly who's running what. You have health care with Gregg Underheim. You know exactly who's in charge, and it's the insurance companies. What is your stance on accepting special interest money, PAC money? How do you feel about tax breaks for big business versus, the little guys getting the shaftola? We're seeing six-figure bonuses for the CEOs at companies while our blue-collar workers are out of work. They're just gone. While they're shifting things overseas and outsourcing and all this kind of stuff, and I love hearing that new term, insourcing now. I suppose that's supposed to make us feel a lot better. But okay, let's go back and try to address the couple of things, because I could get off on a tangent right there.
Well, I haven't received any PAC money yet.
Are you disappointed, or are
no,
you good?
I haven't really been approached. Again, when I've been speaking to groups, I tell them on the things that I agree with, and when they ask me things that I don't agree with, I try to bring those up too. I haven't been on the phone calling any of them either, and as I learned the campaign finance rules, there are fairly decent limits on the amount that you can take per PAC and total PAC. If someone agrees with me, if they appreciate some of my pro-labor stances and they want to give money, that's fine. I'm okay with it. I don't think it should dominate, like you said. I think you're seeing the Manufacturers Association putting out commercials on the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights right now. That are relatively misleading, and it's sort of indirect, use of money to help candidates. On the exemptions, I think, again, my two things, look at the facts and tell the truth. 25 years ago, 12% of the total state revenue was from corporate tax. 25 years later, today, it is less than 5%. So I think the individual taxpayer is paying a higher percentage of the state's revenue. But, I think we definitely know that with property taxes. I think it's 63% of property tax revenue is paid by individual property tax. It'd be one thing if we had given tax exemptions and we had had some good businesses that are coming here that are paying good wages and good benefits, but I'm not sure that's necessarily been the case, and I'm not sure that that's absolutely necessary for business to thrive. I know we're all tired of hearing about it, but our next door neighbor Minnesota has higher corporate taxes, higher taxes to do business, and a far better economy, much more venture capital. They've got the businesses that aren't looking for tax exemptions. They're looking for skilled employees and high quality of life and good schools, things that we have. We've got good schools. I mean, Oshkosh, we live right on a lake and a river. These are natural resources where people want to live. So, the best thing that we can do is have a vibrant city and a skilled population, not, free taxes for somebody to open up a shop and then close it down 10 years later and build another one.
Or be here, use the name of Oshkosh, and then outsource your stuff to Honduras.
Another man has written in and wants to know your position on the Second Amendment, which is, of course, is the right to keep and bear arms, and also what your position is on the concealed carry proposal that was wrestled with not all that long ago.
Sure. Well, first off, on the conceal and carry gun law, I support the state Wisconsin county sheriffs, which all thought that Sheriff Brooks thought that it was a bad law. And that it shouldn't be passed. I guess I have a tough time imagining a group of students down at Kelly's bar getting into a fight, and instead of just punching each other, packing heat per se. On the Second Amendment overall, I think the one thing we know about Wisconsin, especially with our hunters and our fishermen, it's been about responsibility and people having their hunting rifles and things like that. I don't see any real problem with it. I grew up, I wasn't a hunter, but the two things I remember is all my friends taking hunter safety and all the guns being locked up in a gun cabinet. So, I think what we have now is pretty good, and we don't need an invasion on that one way or another, but I don't think we necessarily need to allow it to be legal for people to bring guns to movie theaters or high school sports or the malls. In this day and age.
Okay.
How do you feel about QEO? That is a huge issue. It is a huge issue for teachers. It's a huge issue for school boards. It has controlled a lot of debate for anybody who runs for office, especially at the level that you're running at. What is your stance on QEO and WEAC and?
On QEO, I'm generally not that supportive. I think in the case of the last negotiations that the Oshkosh area teachers had, it worked because QEO was at a level I think that was acceptable to the teachers. Overall, I just prefer them to not use an arbitrary formula like that. I think the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance just came out with a study that ultimately said that Wisconsin teachers' salary is below the national average, but with their benefits, they're above the national average. And as we know, one of the reasons that budgets are getting out of control are because of labor costs due to things like healthcare, which they're high for private citizens, they're high for public citizens, despite the fact that the state's getting rid of numbers. I think we need to leave it up to individual school districts to be able to negotiate that and let the unions and let the school boards work it out. Again, in years like this, the QEO worked to both sides' favor. I know the contract 2 years ago was a lot more contentious, but overall,
So you support the MEDARB going back to mediation arbitration? Because the problem with mediation arbitration is, I'm sure you're very well aware of having a master's,
right,
is it's not let's come to a consensus somewhere in the middle. Right. It's an either-or proposition. It's either the Cadillac plan or the Chevy plan, which is usually like the city entity that's offering the Chevy plan, because we know what we're going to have to pay for. And of course, teachers and administrators are looking for the Cadillac plan because, you know, that in there lies the beauty of union. But there is no way to come to a consensus somewhere in the middle that you can have a blending of these plans with meet ARB. So is it my understanding correct that you actually support going back to arbitration and using benchmarks of like communities and so forth?
All right, I guess I'm not ready to make a committed stance on this yet. I have to consider it some more.
Okay. Gasoline prices. Yike, Gordon. Yike. For somebody like me who drives for work, I'm in sales, it's a killer. It's absolutely a killer. We have some pretty high gas taxes in the state of Wisconsin. In order to, would you support, or is there a way to go about supporting removing or at least lessening the gas tax so that we can bring down some of those gasoline prices, or that the governor could support an overall state lowering of gas taxes to help people? You know, because we've got truck
Sure.
drivers, we've got, you know, I mean, cities obviously weren't planning for these
Right.
kinds of increases.
I think, you know, I don't know what kind of options are available. I think it might be a little short-sighted to just every time. There's obviously it's getting a lot of attention because gas is something that we all see. You know, we go all of a sudden, you know, I paid $40 to fill my tank. That's
Yeah.
crazy. And since it really seems to have more to do with, you know, international and federal conditions, I think, you know, while I'm sure by fleet vehicles for cities and for you know, for truckers that are coming through that are, you know, shipping things in the state, you know, that would be beneficial. But ultimately, I don't believe in overreacting to things. I think we need to see what the overall picture is, and just saying that we're going to cut the gas tax for a certain period of time, you know, I'm not sure is the best thing. And you know, we use our gas money for our roads.
So we're creating a hole someplace else in the budget because they've already
Right,
budgeted
exactly.
for those taxes.
So I think there are probably indirect consequences related to it, and because again that it's mostly a federal decision, I probably would, you know, not touch that for now, but maybe see if there's other incentives that we could, you know, provide. You know, I'm sure cities are looking for creative solutions right now.
Well, the interesting thing about that is that even with our high gas tax, our gasoline price per gallon really isn't out of line with the other states. I mean, it's high, it's out of line as far as I'm concerned, but it's not out of line with what the other states are paying.
Right.
I talked with a friend in California. They're paying, I think, 10 to 20 cents a gallon more in some places than we are here. So it's not as bad as it could be or possibly
maybe
get.
maybe this is the incentive to create more energy efficient vehicles rather than the SUV, which I can't yell about because we own one too.
As do I.
Yeah.
Speaking of vehicles, a viewer wrote in a question on mandatory seatbelt laws, and they'd like to know your views on mandatory seatbelt laws where the police can stop you just simply because you're not belted in. As opposed to having it be a secondary offense where they have to be stopping you for something else. Then if you don't have your belt on, they can give you a ticket for that as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I think this is a case where, you know, you can debate the role of government, but you know, a time when health insurance costs are high, when you have these accidents where people fly through windshields, ultimately the government is saying we're trying to restrict the amount of motor vehicle deaths. We are looking out for the public good. You know, you still don't have to wear your seatbelt, but we will cite you if you're not. You know, for people that don't like seatbelts, it might be a little annoying, but for someone that flies through the windshield from not wearing it, you know, everybody's insurance goes up. And if they're a state employee, everybody's taxes go up. It's just another way to look at it, but it's something to consider, and ultimately it's the way government's way of encouraging people, and I think if it saves lives and if it lowers costs, government's doing its job.
My concern with this, and you know, this, I don't want to create a debate here because we're asking you the questions, but what I don't understand is why is it that government will hit the little guy like you and I and stop us alongside the road for nothing more than potentially a seatbelt violation, but public school buses and city buses are not required to have seatbelts, and they have children and they have elderly people, and these are modes of transportation that are actually paid for and supported by taxpayers' dollars, which include the state. Why would you not require that those entities would have seatbelts?
I think it's a valid question, and I think, I mean, the majority of them, because I see some of these school buses, looks like
Doing,
they're about,
doing,
they
doing, doing,
they look
yeah.
like they're about 30 years old.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure what new buses are coming out, and that's always been a question for me. I mean, not
Yeah.
only was I not sitting in my seat, I was.
Yeah.
They may as well just had a open.
You were one of those.
Yeah,
huh?
I was one
Me
of those.
too. Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming the bus driver of the vehicle, and I haven't looked. You know, I've been hearing the commercials, obviously, and
Yeah. Click
wearing
it
my
or tick
seatbelt.
it, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, in all cases we should. I don't think it was necessarily an effort to go at the little guy as much as it was, this is something that they can have information that we're going to do it and we can actually enforce. I mean, I don't know how we'd enforce the bus one or how we'd install those without raising taxes. I think with newer buses, maybe we should look at safety measures that include that.
How do you feel about Governor Doyle's Kids First initiative, which one of the elements or components of that includes 4-year-old kindergarten?
That aspect of the Kids First I support, and I was disappointed when it was removed from the budget. I believe it impacted 17,000 kids or maybe even more. You know, I support that. If the school district can get early education to kids, I think that's a good thing. And again, I was disappointed that the Republicans in the legislature removed it from his budget.
What about the rest of the initiative? And this was a question from a viewer.
Yeah, I'm actually more familiar with the 4-year-old kindergarten than I am with a lot of the other Kids First initiative. So I can comment later on that.
All right, that's fair. You've most recently moved here from California. Obviously, out there they have a statewide smoking ban. A viewer wrote in, and as you know, we just went through quite a smoking ban situation here in Oshkosh. Would you be supportive of a statewide smoking ban for the entire state of Wisconsin, much like they have in California?
I mean, that's another one like the seatbelt one where you sort of debate the role of government. I know they went through, I don't think things were handled well here in Oshkosh. I think that was one of the problems. If they were going to do it, I think maybe at least delay the implementation or look at, I don't know how the 70-30 thing necessarily works. I guess I respect, in Wisconsin we like to have our rights to do things. At the same time, I think government's looking at skyrocketing health costs, a lot of them to do with smoking, and similar to the seatbelt law. The person that's in the hospital with lung cancer, who's paying their health bills? We are. All of our insurance goes up due to the health-related effects, diabetes, any other smoking-related deaths. So I think, government's not saying you can't smoke. They're saying they're discouraging you from smoking indoors. They are making it harder for you to smoke, and they probably hope you stop. I think New York City has had smoking banned indoors at bars for a year, and smoking's dropped 11%. Now, I don't know if we'd ever be able to quantify the impact on insurance premiums or on taxpayer dollars for that, but I think that's the gist of the issue. As to where I'd support it, I'd have to see what the proposal is. California benefits because you can go outside and smoke and it's not quite as chilly.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I would hope if they did take measures to ban smoking statewide, I would be open to listen to it, but I think that they should look at working with businesses and not making it so insensitive to its economic impacts.
Okay. A couple other things here from viewers. What is your feeling on the governor's ability to negotiate gaming compacts with the Indian tribes without having the approval of the state legislature? And what do you think the fallout will be of the recent court decision that Governor Doyle overstepped his bounds in negotiating these recent compacts with the tribes?
I think, I thought the original court decision set it up so he could originally negotiate like this, and then the Supreme Court just ruled on that he couldn't. So I have mixed feelings because I'm not necessarily supportive of the expansion of continued gaming in Wisconsin. And I know we balanced a large part of our budget on getting increased revenues, but at the same time we opened up gambling even more. It's going to be a problem if we can't get at least the amount of money that was plugged in there And that is probably, looking at the first places they're going to go to cut. It might, come back to bite us in shared revenue or in university funding. I mean, they balanced the budget with that plug. They said that while the Republicans are the ones that challenged it in court, they also supported the budget that had that money. So I don't know if Representative Underheim and Representative Gard are, pointing that they got the governor on this one. That's great. But ultimately,
they're
got
us too.
They may have gotten us too. So I just hope that they can work out something so the plug's filled accordingly.
Do you think the governor should have the ability to negotiate these compacts without the legislative approval?
I haven't considered it enough yet.
As a follow-up to that, do you have any thoughts on how we resolve the problem that we now have with the tribes saying, well, we still want the expanded gaming. We still want to be able to offer this, that, and the other, but by the way, we don't want to have to pay that extra $200 million that the compacts provided.
Right. Obviously that should be a non-starter. They certainly shouldn't be able to get the benefits, and I don't think we should get anything less than was originally settled. If we can get more through the backwards reverse process or whatever we're doing, great. But I don't want us to continue to look at solving future budgets based on revenue that we can ultimately get off people who've lost their money gambling. I think there's indirect consequences on focusing at gaming like that.
Oh, go ahead. You get another one?
I was just going to talk about the Taxpayer Bill of Rights.
Okay, real quickly. There has been a great deal of discussion about lack of coverage of these sessions that go on in the legislature and committee meeting coverage. Would you support a movement to have television coverage in Madison? There's been some talk back and forth that may actually come to fruition. Would that be something that you would support?
The more we can involve the public, like I said, by either having public meetings by the legislature and those that want to get involved, sure, I think it's tight right now just with budget for any sort of expansion. But in this day and age, which technology is getting cheaper, which there's more outlets like video hookups to the internet, I think that's something that should be looked into.
Okay, great. How do you feel about? You'd mentioned earlier the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think first we need to, understand what the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights does. Essentially locking up revenue and expenditures and taking out the decision-making process altogether. It's really a one-size-fits-all formula for over 2,000 units of government, which, vary considerably. To me, it just seems, I think amending the Constitution on this is a terrible idea. It reeks of election year politics, and we put the legislators in there to make these decisions. And I saw the Post-Crescent had an editorial on Monday.
It was a wonderful editorial.
It was great.
Fantastic. It ultimately said,
everything.
Everybody that would support something like amending the Constitution is ultimately saying, "Help me, I can't do my job."
Exactly.
And I just, to me, that's a shame. There's plenty of things we need to look at. If we need to cut spending, where? If we need to look at our revenues and some of the things we were talking earlier, let's do that. But we need guts, not gimmicks, and this is definitely a gimmick.
Do you think we should have term limits for legislative representatives?
Only some of them.
Not for me, of course.
I know in the mid-'90s the term limits movement was really big, and a lot of people changed the law at the local, state level, and a lot of federal people run on that. Even they've kind of turned off. I don't. Because ultimately, as tough as it might be to unseat some legislators, it's a democracy. You still have an equal chance. If people really want to get rid of them and you really want to educate them, you can get rid of them. The problem I have with term limits is when you're making important decisions on budgets, as much as sometimes we don't get the experience that we want from our experienced legislators, it's a bad idea. We want people that have gone through a couple budgets. We want people that have considered other things. And I think some people don't really find their way until a couple years into their term.
Okay. How do you feel about pay parity for women in the state of Wisconsin?
Yeah, I think it's like throughout
Sitting
the country.
at a table full of women.
Yeah, I think it's wrong. But I do. I'm not sure exactly how you address that other than highlighting the fact. And, I know there are several groups out there and there's several lawsuits. I think Walmart's one of them, that there's a major
Yes.
class
Yep.
action lawsuit against, how they've treated women and the lack of opportunities for them to work their way up.
How do you legislate to make sure that there is actual pay parity and not lip service to pay parity? It's interesting to me because we have a female state senator, Carol Ressler, who doesn't feel as though there's a glass ceiling and none of this is really a problem, and yet those of us women who are out there know darn well that our male counterparts in like jobs are making more money. I mean, and there's no bones made about it. So how do we legislate to make sure that there really is reform and that women in like jobs, and I don't mean, similar, I mean like jobs, are actually getting equal pay for equal work?
Right. Again, I don't know. I know that the more attention that the issue gets, the more pressure we can go, the more public that we can make salaries, the more we can ask for justified explanations, the better. But as you know, with a lot of sexism and racism, I mean, it's under under the radar. Oh, not me. Oh, she deserved the bonus, or he deserved the bonus. He's been here. I mean,
this is 2004. I just don't understand why we're still,
69 cents to $1.
Yeah, I don't understand how this can still be happening in the United States, where we have male CEOs making six-figure bonuses, and we can't even get pay parity for women in their day-to-day hourly or salaried positions.
Well, and unfortunately, I mean, that's a trend that still exists, and I think we're seeing more and more just income inequality in general, and that we're losing good-paying jobs and getting low-paying jobs, and you're looking at gross differentials between the few people and the CEOs making good money and working families. So. I think it probably will be getting more attention. I don't have all the answers now, but I know I've heard some of the other assembly candidates up in Carol Owen's district, Steve Dito.
Yep.
I received his sentence on, and I think he's really got that on the brain.
So you would support it if there was an initiative?
Absolutely. I mean, again, you have to make sure that you're not micromanaging businesses, but they should be accountable on that. You're right, it is 2004, and there really is no explanation why we're not looking at equal pay.
Real quickly, because I know we're probably running pretty close, and I don't know how many more questions Cheryl had for the viewers. The federal overtime law that President Bush is looking at implementing and may actually come into effect in August, where there's going to be changes in who actually can get overtime pay, who doesn't get overtime pay. I know that's kind of moving into a federal arena for you. Have you had any opportunity to look at this or see how it may affect your constituency here in Oshkosh?
Only in the sense that, trying to eliminate overtime pay for workers, I am completely against. I mean, we've established, we can thank unions and thank labor for establishing the 40-hour work week. Anything to support businesses even more by asking American workers to work even harder for less money. Is this direction we're really going? So, any effort at the state level is dead on arrival with me in office. And at the federal level, I think, that shouldn't go anywhere either. I don't think we need to help out big business anymore.
Or the disparity between the very, very wealthy and the very, very poor.
Absolutely.
You'd mentioned Steve Dito, and he has just a great many ideas on ways to spur the economy and so forth. Obviously, locally, we've taken a hit with manufacturing jobs, factory-related jobs, that kind of thing. Do you have any thoughts on what we can do locally to spur the economy and start some of these better-paying jobs up again?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to recognize what we do know. I mean, we never know exactly what's going to happen. I knew we do need to get more venture capital. That's been something that's happened in Minnesota that hasn't happened here. I think we need to increase the minimum wage so we make sure that working families can at least get by and have some sort of incentives for affordable health care. But again, to me, the keys for the economic success of our area and statewide is going to be investing in cities and making the university accessible and affordable. It is going to be a brain power economy. That's what we hear. That's what we know. Businesses will locate here if they see we've got a skilled population. I think we can, look at, we already have a desirable place to live because we've got beautiful natural resources and good schools. But by investing in those things, I think it can really lead to a successful place for people to do business.
You talk a lot about the university and intellectual capital. Isn't that nice that I screwed up the word intellectual? That really impressed people. The brain power on this side of the table has just ebbed to a new low. You went to the University of Madison, was that not correct?
For graduate school.
For graduate school. How do we get local kids to go to school here, get a great education, which we provide at a pretty reasonable cost up until we've had all these increases in tuition, and then keep them here?
In about 30 seconds.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. I didn't mean to throw that in. I apologize.
I mean, in some ways, I think I see it more, especially going out now and about. I think there is a young professionals sort of movement going on here that makes that there are jobs here. There are young people filling them. I know there's a couple of groups like Propel and the Oshkosh JCs that I've seen. I think the university and the city have always been a little disconnected, and both physically and socially. Knocking down Universal Foundry, there seems to be a little more connection. I think once we keep developing the river, it will be there. But I think a lot of it's going to come down to jobs. I mean, we get a regional pool of people, and if someone, from Berlin or Princeton and smaller places comes to Oshkosh and sees that they can get a job afterwards, this will be a place they want to stay. But we need to continue to invest in the community, make it a desirable place to live, socially, culturally, economically, and I think there are some efforts underway to address that.
Okay.
We're just about out of time. Why don't you take about 45 seconds, look straight ahead into that camera, and tell folks why they should vote for you in November.
Okay. Well, my name is Gordon Hintz. I'm running for the 54th Assembly seat. I feel that I am the best candidate and can do a better job due to my experience, my qualifications. I've spent the last 8 years working in the state government, federal government, and local government. I have both legislative experience. I understand the role of leadership in how government works and how politics work. I also have done concrete budget experience. I've been the one deciding where we're going to cut, how we're going to balance a deficit budget. I think that I have the ability to work with people to get rid of the people that have brought us the $3.2 billion deficits and increased spending, the people that gave away tax exemptions and didn't receive any corporate revenue. I'm about guts, not gimmicks, and I've got experience that counts. And I hope you check out my campaign at www.hintzforassembly.com. You can sign up for emails, you can find out more about me, more about my candidacy, and I hope you'll come out and see me this summer and this fall. I'll be all over Oshkosh, and I look forward to meeting you.
Great, thank you very much. And currently, there is no other Democratic candidate running, but if somebody else throws their hat in the ring, then of course there'll be a primary in September, I guess. So, all right, terrific. Well, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely.
And good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks,
for
Gordon.
having me.
And thank you folks for joining us as always. For Melanie Bloechl, I'm Cheryl Hentz. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care and keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.